pre-Meat Mafia and not living an evolutionarily consistent lifestyle. This is so funny because it's like I just see who you are. So I'm so curious, what did your life look like then versus now?
Yeah, so I think there's like been a few iterations of it. When I was a teenager, kid growing up, I was very dialed in from just like the wanting to play sports all the time. I found training like very early on. So when I was like 14 and 15, I was going out on these like long runs. So I had this like weird just draw to like fitness and like physicality of sports, and diet not so much. Like I was definitely the type of kid who could just like get away with eating a bunch of like whatever I wanted. And then when college came around, or actually, sorry, backstep, in high school, was just working out of this gym that was like incredibly focused on performance. So it was a gym in Tyson's Corner, Virginia called Prospects, and I was in there day in and day out. And the guys there were incredible at just like functional fitness, really teaching you biomechanics and how to like improve movement skills that could then be transferred onto the sports field, baseball, football. So I was just like those guys like shadow. I followed them everywhere. They were kind of mostly performance stuff, but then talked a little bit about nutrition. So I got a little bit of insight on nutrition stuff there. But it wasn't until I came across, I think it was like Tim Ferriss podcast in college, when I was really just like looking for ways to continue to just get better, and found the paleo diet. So like my freshman year, I was like doing that, trying to just get better and better. And then I would say still very focused on training through my sophomore year. I stopped playing baseball my junior year, and that's kind of when like the identity shift for me, like being an ex-athlete, started to like take form. And was having all these like great new experiences. I studied abroad. I was able to intern for a company that I ended up working for after school. But all of that kind of took me away from like being the athlete, and I started to focus less and less on nutrition and training, and was just focused on like what was next. And so when I got into my job, I worked at the same company for 5, 6 years after school, and I was just I found myself in this place where I was so focused on work, not as focused on the other areas of just like taking care of myself and really prioritizing fitness. Like I was still like for the average like desk guy, like in decent shape, but I just wasn't like who I was before.
Mm.
And really when COVID hit, I like before COVID, I was just like, man, I gotta get back to just like being an athlete again and just feeling really good. I was just like tired, like not eating right, and starting to just like feel like my energy and zest for life which just like wasn't what it used to be. And so I just started tinkering again with the diet, doing like a keto diet right before COVID hit. And then when COVID hit, I just like went back all in and was um, experimenting with carnivore, did carnivore for a few months, was in incredible shape. And that was like the catalyst for me where I was like, all right, I gotta like, and I like stopped drinking. It was
Mm.
just like, this is the way I need to live. And I think like for me, I never really had like a crazy drinking phase or anything like that, but there was definitely a point in my life where I was like spending way too much time just kind of like in neutral, not really pursuing anything
Mm.
bigger than just like, showing up to work. And that really just like rubbed me the wrong way after, a few months of just like being in that place where we felt stuck. And the diet and lifestyle changes that I made kind of right before COVID were what got me out of that for sure, and made me kind of reconsider what I was doing. Applied for a job down here as a chief of staff, and that kind of led me down here through a windy route. But yeah, it's been amazing. I would say like my story really is centered around just kind of like taking ownership
Mm.
and doing it through nutrition and like lifestyle changes, and really just trying to get dialed in on that front. And would love to just like help as many people as I can figure that out for themselves, so they can quit their job or invest more time into their family or invest more time into a business, because the health side of things is just like bedrock. It's
Mm.
the foundation to everything.
I really like that it was kind of a pursuit of retrieving your previous athletic career, or what was left of that in normal life, post-college life, that kind of led you to this breadcrumb trail. And it's interesting because a ton of people, including myself, really took health into their hands in a different way around 2020, including the alcohol thing. I mean, we could go on and on about how there's this, I don't want to say anti-alcohol movement, but there's a movement associated with health where people are starting to ask, like, does this serve me? And it seems to be a resounding no matter how deep they were into alcohol. So for Brett, what about you? Pre-Meat Mafia, what did life look like?
Ooh, it's a good question. I was thinking about this before we sat down to interview because I feel like we've told our story a decent amount, and I was just trying to think about some different themes of how I could bring it into this conversation. But I think pre-Meat Mafia, leading up to what we're doing now, I feel like my life has always just been kind of this question of like, what if? And so what I mean by that is, similar to Harry, grew up an athlete. My dad played college baseball. Baseball was really like my sport and my passion. Grew up pretty like undersized, to be honest with you, like wasn't super talented, didn't have the best arm, wasn't the best hitter, but had a good work ethic. And I actually got cut from the middle school baseball team when I was in 8th grade. And I thought that I should have made the team, but didn't have a great tryout, didn't have a lot of confidence in myself. And I basically took that whole year being like, what if I can actually, turn myself into being one of the best baseball players in my class? Because I remember when I was really young, my dad would always say, like, you're going to be better than a lot of these guys. And I couldn't really see it at the time, but I started leaning into that mindset more. So going into high school, really got into like dialed into my training and recovering and working a lot harder than the other guys. Had a really good high school career, was all state, had like 25 Division I scholarships. Ended up picking a school called Seton Hall, which was a small Division I school in New Jersey that had a really good program. Got to college, never really had been like a drinker or a partier before. I always felt like I made really good decisions and kind of went down the wrong path, and also just had like a lot of stress and anxiety around like my confidence as a baseball player, because when you get to that level, you go from being like the big fish in a small pond to where everyone was like the best player in their high school or their state or whatever. And I really just did not step up to the plate or perform really well, to the point where I was like so stressed out, I was literally like throwing up before I would play games. And that's when I think some of my stomach issues started to trigger. So ultimately, my freshman year of college, I got cut from the team, so I transferred to Babson, which was a huge blessing in disguise. That's how Harry and I ended up, playing baseball together and becoming friends. That's like the core origins of the Meat Mafia story. And again, kind of just that like what if mentality of, hey, I have a second chance here. Maybe I can do something like really special with my time at school. Had a great experience at Babson. Ended up going into my senior year. That's when I really started to have some health issues, just from the drinking, the stress, not prioritizing my health, eating a lot of processed foods, not sleeping enough. Got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis when I was 21 years old. Was flared up to the point where I was, shitting blood 20 times a day. I lost 30 pounds, hospitalized. No doctors are talking to you about diet and lifestyle at that time. This was like 2016 going into 2017. And really everything changed for me when I graduated college, because I kind of just took an honest look in the mirror and just didn't really like what I saw in the mirror. So started getting into endurance running, which led to like some marathons and triathlons and things like that, just trying to tap into that physical potential. And then another what if moment was when I listened to Sean Baker on Joe Rogan's podcast. And first time I ever heard about this concept of a carnivore diet and people holistically healing themselves and getting off of all these drugs. So for me, it was, again, like, what if I could actually be one of the people that could lean into some of these dietary measures and maybe be drug-free and prove that I can cure this thing holistically. And, just went relentless with it, did the diet pretty strict for close to upwards of a year, and cleared out all my stomach symptoms, got off all the meds that I was on, got all the inflammation out of my system. And, to this day, I'm the only patient in my GI's history that's ever gotten anyone off of these drugs before, which is pretty remarkable considering all I was doing was just like eating meat and taking care of myself too. So it's like you hear these themes, and I think with both of us, this passion for what we're doing now has always been there. And so when Harry and I did this Ironman race together, which was about 4 months before we started the podcast, it was like the what if moment of, okay, what if we could do this Ironman? And we did it and had such an amazing experience. And when we really looked ourselves in the mirror again and said, hey, can we maybe do this? Do we have something here where we can share some information and maybe help people get healthier? And started writing threads on Twitter, which started blowing up. That gave us the confidence of like, okay, we can do this. And that really led to the podcast and to Noble and everything that we're doing now.